Hello, everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We have reached another Friday, so of course that means I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Um, we are also at the very beginning of May, and as such, this week's Film Rec Friday is extra special to me. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and this week I really wanted to put together a list of highly recommended films that either deal with Asian cultural themes or star um, American actors of Asian background. So I think a lot of these stories are really excellent. I have a couple of documentaries in here. I have a ton of really phenomenal, critically acclaimed films, many of which are in English, so we don't have to worry about subtitles too often. Um, but yeah, I love these movies. So many of these are really fantastic, and I did go through and try and put together a really good swath of different tones and different themes. So I hope that you will find something in here that catches your interest. If you don't find anything within here, make sure you check out Canopy. Canopy has put together an entire section full of really fantastic films that are all themed towards this particular month, and the movies on this list are just incredible. So, like I said, if none of the particular titles you find on my list catch your fancy, make sure you check out Canopy's list of titles. They've put together a fantastic curated list, and something on there will definitely speak to you. This week in particular, we're just focusing in on Hoopla Digital titles and on Canopy titles. Both of these services, of course, are available to you totally for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card, as always. And that's not to say that CleveNet's Overdrive does not also have excellent titles. It's just there's so many really fantastic ones on Hoopla and on Canopy, and I didn't want to make this an hour-long video, so I figured we'll just focus in on those two services for this week. So I want to go ahead and just jump right into these recommendations. So without any further ado, let me get you to those recs. Okay, the first group of recommendations, like I mentioned, is going to be from Hoopla Digital. And okay, I know I said almost all of these titles you don't have to worry about subtitles. This very first one, it does happen to be a Korean language film, so there are English subtitles, but it is a really phenomenal film and well worth the extra trouble of the subtitles. So please bear with me and absolutely check it out. This is a film from 2018 called Burning. Now, Burning was actually one of South Korea's most critically acclaimed films in 2018. It was almost universally lauded. It's described as a romantic thriller, but I don't know that I would describe it as a romantic anything. It is, for me, definitely one of those movies that is a thriller, suspense, mystery. I mean, you are absolutely caught into this story right away. It's about this young man who reacquaints himself with a young woman he knew in his past, and circumstances arise where he suddenly has to become super duper suspicious of everything that happens when this young woman just suddenly disappears. He's just found her again, and then she's just gone. And if you like movies that make you tense, this is absolutely perfect for you. It really does make you clench your fists. It's not scary like a horror film is, but it is definitely suspenseful. You don't know who you can trust. You don't know when the other shoe is going to drop, but you know something nefarious is definitely going on. Now, why is this particular film in my list? So the main actor is actually a very, very famous, successful young performer from South Korea, Yoo Ah-in. He's been in a ton of films, a ton of Korean dramas. If you have Netflix and you've seen the recent zombie flick, I believe it's called Alive. It's either Live or Alive. I think it's Alive. The lead actor in that is the same lead actor in this film. But the secondary male lead is actually played by Steven Yeun, who a lot of you may know from the Walking Dead series. He played Glenn. He is absolutely fantastic in this. He was always amazing in Walking Dead. He does a really great job at heart-centric characters. But this film absolutely turns any potential preconceived notions you may have had about him and his acting abilities totally on its head. He is part of the reason that the young male lead is so suspicious of what has happened to this young woman who suddenly disappears. And it's hard to describe. I would say Steve Yeun's character is quietly menacing. He doesn't strike you as immediately dangerous. He's a slight guy. He's not someone that you're going to think is going to like be able to beat someone into submission or anything like that. But there's something off, and he just embodies this character with so much wrongness. I don't know. There's just something about the character, and he does a fantastic, fantastic job. So besides this being an exceptionally well plotted and paced thriller, I mean, the pacing is really good throughout the whole thing. You're feeling tense, right? Besides all of those elements, it was actually submitted to the Academy Awards for their Best Foreign Language Film category in 2018. It, of course, did not win that year, but it was the first Korean film to make it to the final 9 film shortlist, which, of course, is fascinating because in 2019, Parasite came out, and Parasite ended up not only winning that award, but also winning Best Picture overall. So this was certainly, kind of an upswing into what was coming down the pike. This is such an unsettling movie. I mean, really, truly, the whole thing makes you feel a little bit off kilter and off balance. And that's fantastic when you're in the mood for a thriller. So if that's the kind of movie you're looking for, please, please, please check out Burning. It is, again, English subtitles with a Korean language audio track, but 100% well worth the watch. And again, it's on Hoopla. My second recommendation from Hoopla, I believe I've mentioned ages ago, is the movie Joy Luck Club. This is one of those quintessential mother-daughter films, family drama. It follows 2 generations of Chinese and Chinese American women that just pulls me in every time I watch it. I've read the book, which is originally by Amy Tan. It doesn't seem to matter how many times I see these characters interact. It doesn't matter that I know exactly how the storyline goes. It's something about the performance of these women, the performances of the mothers and the daughters, the relationships, the utterly complicated webs that they've built around one another. It's just absolutely fascinating to me, and I can't say enough good things about this movie. You have 4 sets of first-generation young women who are very thoroughly American. Like, they've grown up here in the States. They have lives. Their attitudes are very far from what I think the standard public thinks about stereotypical East Asian behavior. And they are all bearers of very complex relationships with their moms. The mothers are all have all immigrated from China. They all are, I wouldn't say stereotypically East Asian, but they all carry, certain behavior patterns that are very different from their daughters. So it's this generational and cultural gap that they have to navigate. And what I think is most interesting about this movie is that obviously culture is a massive part of the storyline, but I think it's the relationships between the mothers and the daughters is so relatable regardless of your own personal background, because there's certain themes that become clear, are universal, uh, the more complicated these relationships get and the further we go into these movies. And it's just, I don't know, I think there's something really comforting in seeing that sort of universal relationship and generational gap. um, Parts of this film are absolutely heartbreaking and others are totally hilarious. You have stories that really dive into cultural history, pieces that are very much, lighter, especially within the contemporary girls' tales. But through it all, you definitely have that thread of relationships between mothers and daughters, that unbreakable bond. And it's really just kind of beautiful. I, again, have seen it many, many times. I've read the book many, many times, and I still really enjoy the stories. So if you're looking for mother and daughter tales, if you are looking for stories that really dive into the concept of generation gaps, cultural gaps, this one is one to check out. Wayne Wong is the director. He has done some fantastic, fantastic movies. And Joy Luck Club is probably one of his best. So yeah, please do check out Joy Luck Club. It is also available on Hoopla. And my final recommendation from Hoopla is for a small movie called A Thousand Years of Good Prayers. Now, this film is a father-daughter story, and I had never seen it prior to putting together this list. I watched it last weekend and I absolutely fell in love. It follows the relationship between a woman who, in her, I would say her 40s, leaves China for America and just builds her own life here. She has separated from her family, not in a truly negative way or anything, but she's independent. She develops friendships. She really does build a whole new world for herself, with, you know, no ties to parents, no friends from back home. Like it's a clean slate for her. And her father ends up coming to visit her, because of the young woman's recent divorce, and he clearly wants to rebuild his relationship with her, but he has a lot of difficulties with her new behavior patterns, with her new lifestyle. But at the heart of it, he really wants to know her. He wants this relationship to work. And I thought that was so unbelievably beautiful. Again, a universal theme of trying to communicate beyond those gaps within generations, within cultures, and seeing someone from the older generation try to break down boundaries is always, for me, really, really lovely. And there's just this sort of soft, squishy hugness about that sort of an attitude. Which isn't to say that he isn't steeped in some serious tradition where he has very specific beliefs about things, but it's wonderful to watch on screen as he tries to navigate both sensibilities, both an Eastern and a Western sensibility, trying to understand where his daughter is coming from, where she is feeling and how she is existing in this new world. Um, so yeah, if you're looking for a really lovely, quiet film about a father and a daughter and life changes and crossing boundaries, check out A Thousand Years of Good Prayers. It's really lovely, and there are some really surprisingly sweet moments that I wasn't even expecting to get in a film like this. So again, Hoopla Digital, A Thousand Years of Good Prayers. Make sure you check this one out. Okay, moving on to my recommendations from our Canopy service. First one of these is a documentary, and it's for all the foodies out there. This one is called Soul of a Banquet, and it follows the world of renowned chef Cecilia Chiang. Chiang is one of those people who essentially brought authentic, legit, delicious Chinese cuisine to the US. Uh, Honestly, prior to her, it was pretty. It was a pretty flat landscape as far as Chinese food went. You know, you'd have like sweet and sour chicken or like very typical, very westernized Chinese dishes. The things that you'll see in any, random like strip mall Chinese joint across the country. But Chiang, she really brought like legitimate dishes from China to the US and provided them in a way that was accessible to the masses, that still would appeal to everyone, both people looking for just tasty Asian food, but also like real authentic dishes as well. Um, she was the owner of the Mandarin in San Francisco, which started, I believe, in 1960 or 61. And it's this epically famous restaurant. Um, for ages and ages, it was like the who's who of places to go to eat Chinese food, um, which in recent years has closed down, unfortunately. But for years and years, it was just the place to be. And um, in this documentary, they really dive into a lot of the thought process she had into bringing these really unfamiliar things to the West. Like, you know, it wasn't even just the dishes themselves, but how they're served, family style, how they're plated. She really taught people the way you're supposed to enjoy these kinds of meals. And I don't know, there's something really endearing and exciting about that kind of a meal, something that brings a newness to people that maybe have never been exposed to it. Um, and when the documentary tracks people who are fans of hers, it's exciting to see how much they gush about their first experiences trying certain dishes, their first experiences even meeting her. Um, it's definitely enlightening, and goodness gracious, you are absolutely going to be starving by the end of this film. So I would say don't watch on an empty stomach. You will 100% be craving food by the end, or after the first couple minutes if you're like me. But yeah, if you are interested in culinary history, if you're interested in Chinese food in general, if you're just a foodie who wants a good documentary, please check out Soul of a Banquet. It is fantastic and thoroughly entertaining and available on Canopy. My next recommendation from Canopy is for a very small indie film from 2017 called Columbus. I did not pick this because of Columbus, Ohio. It is just about a little known Midwestern town, this film is, where a young woman named Casey ends up kind of getting entangled in a friendship with a young man named Jin. Now, Jin is played by John Cho, whom I absolutely adore. I have watched almost all of his movies. He is Harold from Harold and Kumar. I would say that's where most people probably know him from. But he's also done several different TV shows. He is Sulu in the new Star Trek films. Um, he's a fantastic actor, and this movie really, really broadcasts that. He plays a young man who is attending to his dying father, and he has a lot of feelings about this situation that he finds himself in. Um, and when he meets Casey, and as their friendship develops, it's interesting to see him unfold. You know, at the beginning of the film, he's very definitely this tightly wound character, and as we go through different scenes, as we hear her speak, as we see him react to her, we see how he just sort of is able to breathe a little bit more, and he does such a good job of that. It's I think really easy to overplay that kind of a person that would just melt, essentially, that turns into a good guy, or not a good guy. It's not that he was a bad guy at the beginning of the movie, he wasn't. um but that kind of nuanced performance is sometimes hard to find, and Cho does just an exceptional job with it. It's such a quiet, introspective film, and the setting is really beautiful, and everything about this movie is about little moments. So you have this young woman who is living in this town that she grew up in. She was born there. She has no intentions of really leaving. It's just a very quiet but and nice but flat existence for her. Uh, and this outsider character wants her to sort of expand and see what else is out there, and it's lovely, the relationship that they develop. So if you're looking for a movie that just has really beautiful moments and really nuanced, really phenomenal performances, please check out Columbus on Canopy. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous little indie film. It's not, there are no explosions, it's not like a blockbuster or anything, but it is a movie that will absolutely keep your attention from beginning to end. So check it out, Columbus on Canopy. My next recommendation from Canopy is for the film The Farewell. I think this was one of the first films I ever recommended during this series, actually. From 2019, The Farewell. I adore this film. It is heartfelt, it is sad, it is hilarious, it is just an exceptional movie starring Awkwafina, of all people. This was probably the first thing I ever really was that I ever saw her in. I'm pretty sure I'd not been particularly familiar with her work before. Um, Whether we're talking about music, comedy, or what have you, Awkwafina plays Billy, a thoroughly American young woman who absolutely loves her family, her very complicated family, um, and is conflicted about a lie that is being told to her beloved grandmother. That lie being that her grandmother is 100% fine, when in fact her grandmother is dying of cancer. Um, that does not sound like the premise of a comedy, but there's so many moments in this movie that are so funny, like laugh out loud funny even. But there also is this sort of reserved sadness at the same time. Like it's one of those movies that is very, very layered, uh, and layered in a way that makes no sense. Like, in a good way, in the best of ways. Like, I would not expect that a movie that has so much, like, I don't know, melancholy to it. It's melancholy's not even the right word, but this sense of oncoming death. You wouldn't expect to be able to laugh out loud in a movie like that, but you absolutely do. Um, there is a lot to unpack about cultural norms within this. Um, according to the storyline, it's definitely not unheard of to keep an ill elder member of family in the dark about their own health. Um, Being thoroughly westernized, I can't even fathom that sort of a situation on one hand, but coming from an Eastern background, I absolutely can see that being the norm as well. Um, and watching a movie that has so many things that seem to be at odds, it makes for a really interesting entertainment experience. The acting in this is exceptional from top to bottom, whether we're talking about the very gentle, very empathetic grandmother who is this primary figure in all of the situation, um, all the way down to, to Billy's character, who is just so at a loss as to what she should be doing, whether or not she is doing the wrong thing by keeping this family secret, whether she should go against the grain and follow her heart, or she should toe the line and do what the family wants. It's interesting to see those struggles play out on screen. And it's even more interesting to see those struggles play out on screen with so many different emotions behind it. Um, what I found most fascinating about this film is that it is sort of based on a true story. It is actually the writer director Lulu Wang's own family history, where this situation was real, very much real for her, where this huge health lie was being told to an elder within the family. And um, this particular person who was affected is, at the time that the film was made, still alive and still, doing okay. Um, I guess having those different things behind this film also make it just one more layer of fascinating and complicated to me. But yeah, if you are looking for a movie that really has a lot of themes in it that will make you question whether you would behave in the same way, what kind of behavior patterns you would fall into if you would do the same things that these characters are doing, check out The Farewell. It is a really fascinating film that happens to be both funny and sad and heartwarming all at the same time. Um, and it's just an excellent little film that was critically lauded and that you can absolutely sense why. So again, The Farewell, available on Canopy. Now, my last recommendation is actually for sort of two films, but they're both in the same series, so I figured it's just one movie. And those two films are Slaying the Dragon and Slaying the Dragon Reloaded. These are both documentaries that really dive into the media stereotypes of Asian and Asian American women in film, in television, in media in general. And these are documentaries I think everybody should watch, no matter what you feel about documentaries in general, simply because they are enlightening to people who maybe aren't super familiar with the stereotypes that are portrayed with regard to Asian women. And it's certainly a fascinating watch for people who happen to be of Asian descent. Just because there's tons of history going on in these. If you are a history fan, especially, make sure you watch these, because you'll pick up on all of these things that maybe you weren't aware of were going on at the time. Like I said, these are fascinating films. They talk about, they go all the way back to silent movie era, where you have like the dragon lady persona in the background, where you have tons of yellow face going on in silent era, but then early film era, all the way into 50s, 60s era films, where you would have white women being portraying themselves as Asian, usually with the use of course, certain colors of makeup, but also like the taping of the eyes. Like there's just a lot to unpack there, a lot to unpack. Um, but beyond just the yellow face, you've got like these thematic kinds of archetypes. You've got like dragon ladies, you've got Susie Wongs and the geisha girls, you have like these films based entirely on exoticism and like the docility of Eastern women. And it's just fascinating to see it all unpacked on screen. Things that I wasn't aware of, like during 80s era news on television, where you'd have like really visible Asian women like Connie Chung sitting in those anchor desks. If you they talk to a couple other Asian news anchors, and it's really interesting because apparently oftentimes they were made to go back into makeup to be made to look more like Connie Chung, because that's what the image of the news broadcasting Asian American woman was supposed to look like. I mean, there's just so much going on in these documentaries, and obviously in real life at the time. And it also makes you ask the question of how far have we come from this? Are we really that far from these moments to begin with? And I think those are questions that are always important to ask, regardless of what situation we're talking about. I find these kinds of documentaries thoroughly engrossing, and again, like those little tidbits of recent history that I might not have been aware of because I was like a small child. Like I didn't really know what was going on in the 80s because I was like 4 during them. So like seeing those pieces is definitely it's definitely an interesting thing. So if you happen to be a fan of history in general, if you are curious about how the media has portrayed Asian women from past to present, if you just are looking for a really solid set of documentaries, these are short. One is an hour long and one is about a half an hour long. So put together, it's just the length of a single film, really. Totally check these out. Slaying the Dragon and Slaying the Dragon Reloaded. They're both available on Canopy and 100% worth the watch. Excellent, excellent, excellent films. So with that, those are going to be all of my film recommendations for the week. As I mentioned, if none of these tickle your fancy, make sure you head on over to Canopy and check out their Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month picks. They've got a huge selection that's already been curated. It's broken down into categories, so if you're not into documentaries, you don't have to watch documentaries. It's got by popularity. It's a really well put together collection. As always, all of these movies are again available for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So please feel free to check any of them out. If you have any recommendations for titles, please put them in the comments below. I am always really excited to hear about titles that I'm not familiar with, so please do share. If you have recommendations for future themes that you'd like for us to cover, please share those as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to a close. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.